Open, outspoken, it's ophthalmology off the grid, an honest look at controversial topics in the field. I'm Blake Williamson. Welcome to another episode of Ophthalmology Off the Grid. In today's episode, my co-host, Dr. Neda Nikpoor, and I are excited to welcome Dr. Karl Stonecipher. In this episode, we talk about the evolution of presbyopia treatments, as well as some of the options currently on the market and coming down the pipeline. This and more coming up on Off the Grid.
Support for this podcast comes from Bryn Mawr Communications. BMC produces a number of informative podcast series spanning a variety of topics in ophthalmology. Discover a new show at itube.net/podcasts.
Welcome to another episode of Ophthalmology Off the Grid. It's your host, Blake Williamson, with my main gal, co-host, Dr. Neda Nikpoor, here for round two. Neda, what's going on? How you doing?
Aloha. I'm here at Hawaiian Eye with Karl. We're having a fantastic time, missing you.
Unbelievable. You guys are both in Hawaii. Karl's playing cornhole with Jim Katz and enjoying margaritas, and you guys are just having a blast, and I'm stuck in Louisiana. But that's okay. That's okay. I'm just happy I get to look at you guys in your beautiful tans. Neda, you and I were talking about episodes and ideas, and you're like, we got to talk about presbyopia. We have to have Karl Stonecipher. And I was like, I know that guy. He's a Tulane dude. We can definitely bag him. And sure enough, you got him on the line. So why don't you introduce Karl and start us off?
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. So I am thrilled that Karl is taking time out of his super busy schedule at Hawaiian Eye to get together with us to talk about this. So Karl and I are both from Oklahoma. So we have that in common, which I love about him. And just like so many people in Oklahoma, he is just the kindest, most genuine man, and such a delight to be around. Yeah, and he's so knowledgeable on so many topics. And yeah, I'm just really excited to hear what he has to say about what's new in the world of presbyopia, because there's been some exciting developments. So I'd love to hear his thoughts.
Absolutely, and thank you guys for having me here. It's we're in Hawaii, and Ned and I are doing a lot of KOL meetings, but we're suffering by the pool and playing cornhole in the Hawaiian Eye tournament. But I took a break. I would like to tell you that I'm still moving towards the championship game, but I was one and done. So, I'm okay.
Karl, I love it, man. So I appreciate you. I want you to kind of, the thought about this podcast was, sort of the arc of presbyopia treatments and how things have changed, because it used to be, monovision back in the day, or blended vision as we call it. And then we have IOLs, and now we have you in eye drops now. So maybe like a year ago, can you talk about if it was a year ago and you had like a Plano presbyope coming in your office, what would you offer them if they said, hey, I want to get out of reading glasses, and how might that be different today?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the reason it's a great question is because evolution occurs in ophthalmology. So we always think we're reinventing the wheel all the time. And I think that the biggest issue with presbyopia is I'm like you, and my practice is very similar to you and your dad's. And that's, I've got 495 optometrists referring to me. So I'm very big on contact lenses, whether that's a multifocal contact lens, a high ad, a low ad, whether that's doing a monovision. When I had LASIK, I had monovision, and I did a contact lens trial and pushed myself as far as apart as I can. And so I can still read and do what I need to do. So there were a lot of those tricks. And if you talk about IOLs, I operated on my mom, I operated on my aunt, I operated on my father-in-law and my sister-in-law. And a lot of times we didn't have a great option even with an intraocular lens. So I think it's the gambit of, okay, where is somebody in their life? What are their hobbies and their habits? And, we're always looking for the new. We're always looking for something that can change. And so, we've worked towards, something different, or we need that kind of gateway to get us from what do we do before we get cataracts, and what do we do if we get LASIK? And so I think that, everybody's always trying to figure out what they're doing in life, whether they're a pilot, okay, and then, but what if they like to tie fishing flies? You and I are loving to fish and doing all that sort of stuff. Well, that's two, totally different things that we have to be able to provide this person with. And I don't know, you guys are both young, so friends around you that are putting their reading glasses on. It's miserable. It's just not an option. And if we can prevent that option, it's great.
So Karl, talk to me a little bit about, you have a refractive practice just like ours. You have a surgical referral practice. And one of the most challenging patients a year ago, 5 years ago, even today, is the patient who's in the, I would say, 40 to 55 or 45 to 55-year-old age range. Of all the patients that come into our practice, I feel like they're the ones that have the hardest time making a decision because there are many options. And up until Presby drops for some patients, any refractive surgery had some compromise in either binocularity or visual quality with like diffractive lenses with refractive lens exchange. So how are you handling a patient like that now in terms of explaining the different options to your refractive surgery consult patients and helping guide the conversation of which treatment option is best? Are you having everybody start Presby drops? Are there certain candidates you're using it for? I'm going to talk about that a little bit.
So let's define it for just a second. So there's three patients that I kind of wrap my head around. The first patient is the latent hyperope. They've seen great at distance all their life. They're reading great. And maybe somewhere in their late 30s, they're like, I can't see my phone anymore. I can't see my computer anymore. I'm getting more and more headaches. That's patient one. Patient two is the low myope. And, they do very well. I always say the perfect refraction is like a -75, -1, maybe a little bit more. They can see, they pass their driver's test. And then the one that's most frustrating for you and I is what? Like the person that comes in and says, my LASIK wore off. So doc, you gave me this lifetime guarantee and now my LASIK wore off. And I'm like, but you're still seeing, 20/20 to distance or better. And they're, yeah, but I can't read anymore. And so then that's probably the biggest challenge I have. So that's where, for me, the Presby drop has become the godsend, so to speak, the gateway drug, whatever you want to say for it. But we started working with all these, I work with 3 different products, and we started working in about 2013. And so we've been through probably 20 to 30 different formulations, whether that's combination drops, whether that's, concentration. And I think that, Allergan is the lead runner. And if you want a company that's going to be the lead runner, they're very good at marketing things. And so I think that they've come up with a GUI. It's completely different than pilocarpine. So when people look at me and go, oh, it's just re-engineered pilocarpine, I say it really isn't. And you just kind of need to dig down and dive in it a little bit deeper. And I think that, this is one of those opportunities where you ask me, who do I give it to? Everybody. So I think the studies report about 9 out of 10. So it's not for everybody. It's not going to work for everybody. I think if you got a brown iris, your eye's going to suck up the drop a little bit more than if you've got a blue iris. So the light blue irises, I'm seeing them maybe less than 3 to 4 hours, where the darker irises, 8 to 10 hours, whereas the darker irises are the lower end, like 3 to 4 hours. And we're about an average of 6. So for me, everybody that walks through the door has done well with it so far. But again, we have people that it doesn't work for. I mean, that's 1 in 10 in my practice.
Yeah. What it's interesting, that low myope, that 45-year-old low myope that walks in my office now, most of them do just fine with custom lens replacement. But, a few of them, they can be a real challenge because on one hand, I might want to do like a synergy, symphony, mix and match to give them that great near because they're used to wonderful near without contact lenses. But on the other hand, boy, you better nail that distance vision because with their contact lenses, they saw excellent distance. So it's a kind of double-edged sword. And with Synergy, I've noticed Synergy has given me the best near vision of any lens I've ever used. But the distance vision sometimes is just okay. It's not great, and it takes a few months to kind of come in. So I'm kind of back to mix and matching it a little bit with great results there. But in that patient, I'm kind of starting to say, well, maybe just do a drop of the Presbyopia drop. The Vuity, and see if that can help you, just at least to get you out of reading glasses. And that seemed to work for me. Neda, I don't know, where are you using it in your practice? Where have you found? Because that's the only drop that we have on the market right now. We know that there's several others coming, but what's been sort of your, slam dunk case?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Blake. So I think that early on, when I got samples, I was handing it out like candy. I was trying it in everybody. I was writing prescriptions for everybody. I tried it in some of these latent hyperope patients, and I had some patients who were out, now I know more about the drop. I know, that it should be ideally your target candidate, somebody who's a mild or moderate presbyope, somebody who has a 2 diopter ad or less is really who your slam dunk case is going to be. And at the time, I was trying it in these hyperopes. I was trying it in more advanced presbyopia. And even though patients were getting some improvement, they just weren't getting enough improvement. And so the first patient who I prescribed it for, who was just like ecstatic and thrilled, was somebody just like who Karl is talking about, who had LASIK 10 years ago, is now presbyopic. She is used to having perfect vision and is extremely frustrated by needing reading glasses. And so when she first got the drops, I called her an hour later to follow up and see how she was doing. And she was in tears, and she was telling me that it was just as good and just as life-changing as when she had LASIK, which was really, really, really cool and really amazing to see the quality of life improvement for somebody, which got me really excited about it. One other patient that I had that I think is really interesting is, we're both doing a lot of refractive lens exchange or custom lens replacement, whatever you want to call it. And I would say 6 to 8 months ago, before we had Presby drops, I did a one-eyed PanOptix in a patient, which I generally am not doing. For most of our patients, I'm doing bilateral same-day sequential surgery. But there was a guy who was 20/20 J10, and he really could not tolerate monovision, really wanted a surgical permanent option. And so I did a non-dominant eye PanOptix. Excellent outcome. He was 2015 J1 plus or 2015 J1, something like that. But he was complaining, like a lot of these one-eyed PanOptix patients will, that he just didn't feel like he was as free of glasses as he wanted to be, was still having to use his reading glasses more often than he wanted. And fortunately, he didn't really have the side effect of the lens. He wasn't complaining about night vision. He was really happy with the quality of vision, but he had a little bit of ocular surface irritation still. And so he was hesitant to proceed with his other eye. And it was really helpful for me this most recent time that I saw him to explain in a new way why treating his second eye was actually going to fix his problem, because he had a really hard time imagining why operating on what he thought was his, quote unquote, good eye was going to help. But as soon as I put a Presby drop in his other eye, he, an hour later, is texting me with all these shakas and all this, like, oh my God, doc, this is amazing. You changed my life. I can't wait. I'm so stoked. I'm so ready to get the second eye done. And so it actually was really helpful in illustrating something to a patient that I already know and you already know, but it can be really hard for a patient to wrap their head around.
Yeah, I think that single eye cataract patient is kind of a challenge, and we got them whether they've got a traumatic cataract or one just develops more than the other. And so I think we've used that in a couple of patients that at least show them this is a depth of focus, this is a bilateral issue, and yeah, it's not going to denigrate your distance vision, but it'll walk them towards the mark, so to speak, in terms of convincing them that, hey, that second eye is going to help them out a bit.
What's really funny is I was almost nervous and hesitant to actually put the drop in, because I was like, man, he's going to be upset that he did a refractive lens exchange when he could have just used a Presby drop. But amazingly, his reaction was not, wow, I wish I'd done this and waited. It was, oh, I'm ready to do my second eye now, which actually kind of surprised me.
Well, what I was trying to say was, let's define a couple of things. We want 40 to 50% of our pupil size. So whether that's mesopic, photopic, whatever conditions we're in, whether we're in the Lowe's store, it's got kind of bad lighting, or whether we're out bright sunlight, or we're at the Ruth Chris trying to read the menu. And this drop's delivering that in about 9 out of 10. So if we can get that 40 to 50%, and I just submitted an abstract to ARVO and basically data mined, kind of went backwards on this huge group of patient populations. People don't understand that. This is the largest pilocarpine study, period. There's like 1,000 patients in the study, and we went back and looked and kind of who's that sweet spot, and it's 2 to 2.5 millimeters in the pupil, and it's a dynamic pupil. So it's not like it's static and that we bring their pupil down, more so what you see with the generic pilocarpine than you do with the secret sauce of beauty, so to speak.
Yeah, the interesting thing is I did an interview with the ophthalmologist the other day about this and about presbyopia drops, and the one that's available here in the United States. And in Europe, a lot of the docs are kind of poo-pooing it because I don't think it's available yet, first of all. And second of all, the lady was like, yeah, these glaucoma specialists are telling us it's all marketing. And I'm like, well, you have to consider the source. You know what I mean? I mean, they went into glaucoma, not refractive. What are you thinking? No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. But seriously, though, I was like, I told her, I said, it just depends on who you're talking to and your mindset with it. it's really all about creating a category, right? We didn't have dry eye as a real disease until, a few years back when we started getting some of the pharmacologics. And, now we have this disease that affects over 100 million people. And it's being categorized as that. And I have random people at the country club and in the gym and at the restaurant saying, hey, what is this? What are these drops, right? And so if anything, I mean, part of me is like, who cares how well they work? Let's just focus on the fact that it's going to drive these people into our practice. So from a business perspective, it seems like that's what we should be focused on. Some of the docs in Europe may not be focused on that quite as much as we are, Karl. So I didn't know kind of what you think about it, creating a disease category.
So there's three things we're assured of, right? We get to die, we get to pay taxes, and we all get presbyopic. It's 100%. Now, if I get that sweet spot of -1, yeah, maybe I last for a little bit longer, but for the most part, we're going to die, we're going to pay taxes, and we're getting presbyopic. And I like to explain it to patients that way. It's going to affect you at some point in time. When a patient comes in, you're spot on, and I think a lot like Neda's the same way, Alan Faulkner, her partner's the same way. How is this going to affect my practice? How is this going to affect the feng shui, as I say, of my practice? And the biggest issue is people come in, we're doing an exam on them. If you've come in and you've had a dilated exam within, for me, 12 months, I'm fine. I'm just going to write you the prescription. I don't want to fill a presbyopic slot, say, and lose a surgically slot. So I think that I'm still on, I want to get a surgery spot, but at the same time, our optometrists in our offices, as well as outside our offices, are loving the fact that they're getting more patients that are getting driven to their offices. And we're real big on that in terms of trying to feed our co-managing physicians in terms of the new people. But if you don't co-manage, this is still a great opportunity. And these people come in, I can do it over the phone if I've seen them within the last year. In my opinion, that's what I do. And I give them a prescription. And we have a few samples, Allergan, I think in the smart way is not just flooding the market with samples initially. I think that people need to use it for at least 7 to 10 days before they give up on it. It's like the old days of dry eye. And I'm going to go back and say something. Marguerite McDonald published a paper that has kind of defined presbyopia. So like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, mild, moderate, severe. Well, it's kind of until we kind of started telling the patient what's the difference between a International Task Force level 1 versus 4. We're gonna start treating you earlier with Restasis. Then now with this drop, I'm using the same thing. I say you're mild, in terms of your disease. You wear your glasses sometimes, and you don't have to use the drop all the time. So of the, say, 100 prescriptions I've done already, I would say there's a good majority of patients that don't use it every day because they don't need to. So maybe they will use it 5 days a week when they're working, but they don't use it when they're playing golf or something, So I think it's not a side effect of the drop. They just feel like they don't need that extra But I'm like Neda, some of these patients will put it in and they're going to love it when they come back 15 minutes later and they're like, that's pretty cool. Because the first people we did were all our staff. And that's where I tell everybody to start with your staff, figure out what they like. That's who I use my samples on. I use my samples on, my family, my staff, and then I do a TikTok. I got a little TikTok on my surgery tech, Shannon. She's like, "You really put me on TikTok?" I was like, "Well, maybe, but it works and it shows people, and so I can defer them to Shannon and show them how it works for Shannon. And Shannon's more mature. I can't say how old she is, or she really will kill me. But I think for the most part, she loves this stuff, but she uses it episodically. She said, I'm on the weekend, I don't need it, but if I'm operating, I use it.
Yeah, Karl, I think that's really valuable insight to start with your staff. And I did the same. I started with, even though I'm not presbyopic, I started with myself, my staff, patients that I knew would give me really accurate, detailed feedback about what they experienced. And so one of the questions that I think providers are going to have for those who haven't started prescribing it yet, or maybe haven't gotten their samples yet, is, what side effects do I need to warn patients about? What is the safety profile? And how serious is it? Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, and I think people, let's add one in there. What's different between that and generic pilocarpine? So I get that question from co-managing doctors as well as other physicians who are like, what's different? Well, I think it's the fast technology. And so Allergan has brilliantly, and other companies like Ouch and have done it as well. And I've got to kind of qualify that. I'm a consultant for a lot of different companies. But Allergan knows how to make a drop, and they've figured out the GUI, and basically the GUI is one thing. People don't realize that pilocarpine is about 4.5 on the pH scale. So it's a little bit irritating. Well, with fast technology, it goes to a more normal level like a tier into the 7 range, and these people are comfortable. It's a comfortable drop. I haven't seen a lot of people complain of pain on installation. Maybe my dry eye patients, but your dry eye patients always kind of complain about that kind of thing anyway. So it is definitely different than pilocarpine. And for me, it's different in a couple ways. I think one thing is that it lasts longer. So if we try and give somebody a generic pilocarpine, which CVS has erroneously substituted on purpose on 3 of my patients, and they're like, oh, darn, we didn't really mean to give them generic pilocarpine. And those patients are not getting a wow factor. It's not lasting but maybe 2 hours or something. And so I think that that's one of the things that in the study, we average about 6-7 hours. And that's because of the technology. It's a more comfortable job because people don't realize pilocarpine has to be stored at that lower pH or it's unstable. So I think that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is, okay, is it safe? Well, we've been using pilocarpine for 187 years. Now, Blake and I are Louisiana bound. And so, they started using pilocarpine. They had these big old glass jars full of 6%, 4%, and who knows in the Louisiana sun how hot that got. So it probably got up to about 12%. So I think that some of the stuff that we were taught as residents erroneously is that everybody's going to get a retinal detachment if they're high myopia. So I think it's appropriate to look for that, but they looked at 1,000 cases and we had none retinal detachments in 1,000 patients. Number 2, we asked for, we said, Neda, Blake, do you have a headache? Well, Blake in the control group and you in the beauty group, well, you're all going to have a headache at some point in time, whether you're mad at your wife, your kids are screaming in the back of the car or whatever, you're going to get a headache. So if I say, do you have a headache? You're going to go, well, yeah, I do have a headache. And I think that we're looking at. I can't say that I got a report that, it was a little bit higher in the beauty group than the control group, but I actually have to say, we're going to go back and look at that. We're not going to ask you to get a headache. So those are probably the 2 people that are the 2, nuances that we have to deal with. But I think that the other thing is intraocular pressure. So it didn't change intraocular pressure. And most importantly, what did not change? Distance vision. So that's the first thing I look at anybody after I put a drop in them. I say, hey, go look down the hall or go look outside and tell me if it changes your vision at all. The one person that's exception to that rule is who? Blake, you and I and Neda all have them. It's somebody's got kind of an old LASIK like me, and their corneas have a higher order aberration, and they really actually see better with it, I think. So I think that pinhole effect we used with Alpha-GAN or we used with pilocarpine generic before, it makes a huge difference in that population.
Well, I want to switch gears here in the last 3 or 4 minutes that we have together, and then I'm going to give Neda the final word or final question. I want to switch gears to laser vision correction because, Karl, you do as much or more laser vision correction than anybody that I know here in the U.S. And, there's a lot of people abroad. I'm always thinking about Dan Reinstein doing the Presbyopia and stuff like that. But I don't really hear people doing that here in the United States. Do you know all the manufacturers? You would be the guy to talk to. Is that coming out? I know that J&J is developing a new excimer. What is Alcon doing? Is there any type of thought about creating multifocality on the cornea? And how far out are we from that? And then I want Neda to kind of finish up with our last word.
That's an interesting question because we tried multifocality in terms of on the cornea for quite a while. And I love Dan. He and I argue constantly on panels and, we debate and do all that sort of stuff. And
no,
for him,
you're kidding. You argue with Dan? No.
Not at all. But I do like his sax. I can't play sax as good as him. He's awesome. But I think that, with me, if I can leave your cornea normal, I know it's going to be better. So like a Rayner lens, the Rayner EMV lens just came out and I consult for Rayner, I speak for them and all that sort of stuff. And that's been a really nice addition to my practice. But I think if we change the cornea, we're changing the Q value, we're changing the spherical aberration, we're changing those things that are going to limit our lens choices. And who knows what lens is going to come out. And you guys know that we get a new lens about every 6 months. So I don't want to do something, make a pro-lay cornea that's going to eliminate or limit me using some of these other things. So Dan and those guys say, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this. Blended vision is what they call it, and at Presbyopia, and they say that, I'm going to put in a monofocal lens in you. And I don't think Margarita minds. She said it to me 1,000 times. She said, I chose a monofocal lens because, I want to have, crisp, clear, quality vision, the best contrast I can have. But I think a lot of these lenses, like an Eyhance lens or a Rayner EMV, are giving us that push that gets us past the point. Now, are they perfect? Are they going to get us to, vividity or a panoptics or a synergy level? Obviously not, but I think there's a lot to be said for where we go with that. But I don't think the cornea, and I'm going to go live and probably live this down 5 years later, but I don't think the cornea is the answer. We've tried for probably 20 years trying to do the cornea. And I think if I can fix the cornea, if you've had a bad LASIK, and I don't mean that the surgeon was bad, I'm just saying if you have an older platform like me, I have halos and glares, but I'd do it all over again if you told me that. But I think that we want to preserve that cornea the best we can, but we also have the ability now, whether it's like you mentioned, ray tracing, or whether it's like topographic guided treatments or eye design or wherever platform you're using, I think that it allows us to fine tune that cornea if we needed to as well. And I don't want to have some steep spot that I have to deal with and try and figure out how to get rid of.
So I feel like people talk about how presbyopia is the holy grail of ophthalmology as soon as somebody figures out how to treat presbyopia. So tell me what you're excited about that's on the horizon 1, 5, and 10 years down the road for the pharmacologic and or surgical treatment of presbyopia.
Yeah, so this is going to be my gateway drug. So it's going to help me get people, past, I don't know, 45, 50. But at the same time, I'm a refractive surgeon like you guys. So if somebody comes in with a +4, we had it on the panel today. If somebody did that, David always comes up with these great cases, and it was a +4 case, the guy treated it, and basically the person ended up +6. Because you put the minus instead of the plus in. So I just don't even do those people anymore. I mean, I know that hyperopic LASIK maybe works up for me up to about 2.5 diopters, and I just don't push it past that. I think they see so much better. And I've now published our 30-year history of lensectomies. We're now allowed in many states to do bilateral lensectomy. I can't do that yet in the great state of North Carolina, but I think that we are now it's so much more fun. The lenses are so much better. 5, 10 years ago, I mean, your dad, Blake, and I, I worked with Bruce Wallace, your dad, and all those people that were putting in the 3M lens. And, people think, we're living large with that. I mean, Gills put it in everybody. He was so excited about it. Well, everybody came back and said, this isn't great. I can't see great. The contrast is not great. So we don't want to jump on board always. I think new technology, the next phase is going to be a small aperture lens. It just got an approvable status. So AccuFocus just got an approvable status. They've got their good manufacturing practice, but the FDA basically said, it's COVID. We're not sure. We'll leave you in the approvable status. We're not going to let you go and run yet. So we're probably going to get that later in maybe second or third quarter, I think. So that one's exciting for me. I think especially in, these 16, 18, I had an 82 RK incision patient the other day, 82. And the guy didn't want to, I mean, I know, right? Where do you put all those incisions on top of each other? And he didn't want to transplant. He'd been to 3 other transplant surgeons. They said, go see Karl. And this is going to be a perfect lens for that. And I tell those people, wait. I always hate me, not the patient, not my colleagues. I hate me when I'm in too big a hurry. So I have no problem saying to a patient, there's a great technology and it's coming down the road, and I think that's better. I think there's a lot of newer style lenses. I mean, the Rayner EMV does not come in a toric. Hopefully they'll bring in a toric to the horizon sooner. I've been really happy with that lens. My go-to lens right now for a toric is an Eyhance, because I think it works extremely well. I flip-flop back between a Panoptics and Synergy. I think there's different patients that do better for that. For me, Synergy provides a little bit more near. So I did a -17 the other day, and she's like, okay, where's my uber near? I'm like, your 20/20 distance, 20/20 intermediate, 20/20 near. She goes, yeah, but I can't do this anymore. And I just looked at her and I said, don't do that anymore. Just stop, because you're just going to get frustrated. And we all have those patients, but Blake, there's a horizon of lenses, as we always know. So we were just talking to the J&J people at one of the KOL meetings about, they're already coming out. What would you think if this lens did that? So they're compounding technology on technology, and I love engineers. I mean, I hate them as patients, but I love the fact that they're around. It's like the fact, that Delta and the Navy SEALs are out there. You don't know what they're doing, and so a lot of times I don't know what the engineers are doing, but I'm glad they're there.
I love it, man.
That's amazing.
I love it. Very cool. This has been very, very insightful, and it's given me a lot to think about with how we are using all the different options available to us, as well as sort of, getting us excited for the future and what's to come. So I want to thank my co-host, Neda, and the one and only Karl for coming on and spending some time all the way from Hawaii. I love you guys, and I hope you'll have a wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Blake. Aloha.